Okay, make a start then. A bit low on numbers today, but morning. We're going to have a look today at RESTful services. Thanks for one of the questions in the assignment. So this will be one of the exercises that's definitely worth doing. I did say to the other group that, well, one of the practical labs, what I'll try and put together is a list of essential labs that you definitely need to have completed in order to be able to do this assignment. Of course, if you do them all, you'll do much better. You'll have that much more practice. But anyway, we're on the RESTful area today. Next week, I'm going to have an assignment help session. So I'll push back this, the one about talking about data formats and things, after a session, but that's a week after. But I'll do a help session both in the lecture part and the labs I'll devote to helping out with the assignment there. So you've got sort of questions on that or things, you can just bring them into the lab and, or at least sort of get a start made on it. Quite a few of you may well have come across REST already, particularly if you've been out on placement last year for it, or I think they may have done a slight part of it in the advanced programming to it. It's really just an alternative way of getting access to some sort of web services. You basically got somewhere over on a server, typically via this model view controller pattern. You'll have somewhere some data available to access. So it might be that films data for the assignment, it might be the cities data, but some sort of data that's stored away somewhere. And your model will typically have some sort of interface into that to something like get all of them, get by ID or something like that, insert, delete, all the sort of basic operations that you want to do with a pile of data that's stored away. So as I say, this might be films, these are just the ones that we've been using so far. That'll be the model part, and you can get to that. That's just a sort of standard class. But at the front of it, you put this little controller that interacts with your outside world, your client up here, who may be in a browser, but they sort of interact with that client to request something. Now, so far, we've been sending things like HTTP references. HTTP, the usual sort of address, and then something along the lines of city equals Manchester, and formats equals XML or something like that. You send over a URL like a GET request and put them into it. Last week we looked at an alternative of using SOAP, where basically you create a SOAP envelope that you send to the server, and inside that SOAP envelope is an XML version of all that procedure call. So all the bits about which particular method you want, what the parameters are, what the parameter types are, wrapped up inside an XML block, and the client has to create this XML version, send it across to the server has to decrypt it, and then interact with the model to sort of get to it. We're going to have a look today at a third alternative, this REST one, which again, all it is just a way of invoking a method. So what you're sort of trying to do is to invoke this remote procedure and attach your parameters that you wanted to set. All three of those do the same sort of approach. Your standard HTTP, one is SOAP and the rest. They're all just trying to identify a method over there to call, and they're all just trying to attach some sort of parameters into it. The SOAP's about the oldest way of doing it, then along came HTTP, the one that most are familiar with, and this REST one's out there. Now all it means is that the controller basically decodes the request. It's got to decode the request, whatever format it's in, and then invoke your parameter. Or sorry, invoke your method somehow. So if you change how you actually request your data, then all you need to change is that controller. You don't change your method to get it. The methods are still the same that you call them to get the films, to get the cities, the sort of Java object that you're using, or whichever sort of object it is. All you're potentially changing between those is how you interact with that client. The client's just sending you the request in a different format to it. So when it comes to your assignment, that's the sort of thing, hopefully, that's going to be highlighted in some way, that when you're doing a RESTful call, you should find that all you're changing is that controller part to it in this MVC approach. Similarly, and this is just really just an aside, if ever currently you might be storing those in, say, MySQL. At some point, you'll be storing those in a cloud data store, or you might store them in a file, or you might store them in memory. Lots of different ways, or you might move it from MySQL to Oracle. Now the interface to that won't change, the way in which the controller actually calls it won't change, the way in which you actually implement the get all and insert and delete, that'll differ according to how you're storing the data. So again, one of the benefits of using that MVC approach, if ever you change the model, you don't have to change any of the other components. You don't have to change how the data is requested, unless you're doing two changes, unless you're moving over from HTTP and a MySQL to REST and a cloud-based storage, then yeah, you have to sort of change the two of them. But the idea is sort of separating out this responsibility about who does what. Just like the viewer's responsible for deciding how the data should be formatted before being sent back. The viewer might put it into SOAP format, might put it into HTML format, or XML, or JSON. The actual data stays the same. Now, I'll look at that in a bit more detail next week, because it's very relevant to how you structure your sort of final part of your assignment, and how you might assess or critically assess the different approaches. So if you're already familiar with the HTTP, you're already familiar with the, well, hopefully you had a go at doing that sort of SOAP one. We're going to have a look at this REST idea today, how that sort of differs from the other approaches that we've come across so far. That's just really where it fits in with other sort of aspects. What it basically is here is just a way of accessing web services. You've got some web services somewhere, and it's a way of getting at them, that access mechanism, something that you're going to be approaching your controller with. Now, it's much simpler than SOAP. One of the things that hopefully came out of that SOAP, and why we don't particularly do it much anymore, is that it's fairly complicated to do. There's a lot of tools to help you there, but the actual act of making up a procedure call and attaching parameters is fairly detailed. So it's a simpler approach to do that. Now we're going to compare it really with the HTTP approach, but using GET and possibly POST, and show how possibly we may have been doing it wrong in the past, and we've had to write ways around this for it. And it's now become the most mainstream way of accessing web services by the big players, if you like, and sort of it's trickled down to sort of others. What Google, Facebook all use a RESTful API to get them. and it's now become available, built within the language itself, so Java's got an API to deal with it. There's lots of things to help you along. I mean, currently for the HTTP access, we tend to use, in our ones, the Tomcat server. And Tomcat will decrypt that little GET request into a nice little object that we can use in our controller. So you can just say get parameter for the city, or get parameter for the other one. SOAP has got its own little additional API to help you doing it. We saw how that can be generated as a tool in Eclipse to help you. And we'll see a similar one in the lab for generating this RESTful one. The basic ideas, and these are the sort of four main differences between other approaches that and as I say, well, I'll point out where we may be going wrong with standard HTTP calls. Because this first one about using HTTP methods explicitly is where a lot of us, including me, get it wrong to it. We've gotten lazy over the years and away from what HTTP calls were originally intended to be. So I'll point out a few things about that. Another thing is the idea of a stateless transaction.